This is a Wild Age Production podcast.
Roll them bones.
I know you came here to be what you want in the game of D&D. Assassin, halfling, human, or rogue. Just gotta pick up all those dice and let's roll. We're rolling now for real. We're rolling now for real.
Welcome to Save or Die Expert Edition, the first and original classic D&D podcast.
Good evening and welcome to episode 134 of Save or Die Expert Edition, your source for all basic expert fantasy and D&D related podcast info. I am your host, DM James, and with me tonight is DM Glen.
Hi.
And TM Erik.
Tavern Master. Yes. Hello,
yes,
folks.
He is here. You know, it's funny. I gave you a 5 countdown, and I did the 2-1 silently. Before on SOD, Vince would always do it silently. So I'm going, what the heck's going on? He wouldn't have the video. He wouldn't have the video. So I was like, Vince, are you still there? Shut up! I'm counting down. Okay, whatever.
Tonight, we're going to continue our discussion of different BX classes, and we're going to go into one of the race as classes. We're going to begin with Elves.
Yes. BX,
and
Menser.
BX Elves. Menser, Moldvay, Cook, Holmes.
Holmes, you name it.
Yep.
Should we throw it all the way back to the original 3 books?
We could.
Actually, I'm opening my big mouth because I don't have a copy. I don't have.
I don't either.
I never looked at them.
It will be a lot of us pretending like we know what we're talking about, which is.
Do I need to go to my? Can I get it from my bookshelf? I think I can. Continue on without me for a moment.
So I think we will be
not surprised.
I think we'll begin tonight by Glenn. Which version of the BX Elf do you tend to use, play, and run at your table?
Which version of the BX Elf? There's only one BX Elf.
Well, you know what I mean. I say BX, I mean basic. You know that.
I can't go to my shelf because I'll be right back. Oh, I have headphones on. I'm sorry. My favorite is always going to be the Rule Cyclopedia Elf.
Okay.
I like.
And is there any particular reason for that?
Because I have Rule Cyclopedia. Actually, let me modify that, saying I also like the BX Elf because I played a lot of Labyrinth Lord.
Mm-hmm. And that's why most of my BX gaming has been Labyrinth Lord. Mm-hmm. There's Erik with his white box. The original D&D white box, not Swords and Wizardry white box. I'm the same way. Most of my elf experience comes from actually Rule Cyclopedia and Labyrinth Lord. First of all, do we want to, for anyone, I would assume anyone listening to the podcast knows what D&D defines an elf as, but just in case they don't, we'll go over it here for the cheap seats in the back. Elves are a mystic race of, oh God, Glenn, don't make that face, please. That's just.
I'm listening attentively.
It's an awesome face.
It is not an awesome face. It should be on the It trailer. BX Elves are woodland dwelling creatures who are magical in nature. They tend to stand around 5 to 5.5 feet tall. They enjoy frolicking in the woods, long walks in the wilderness, and most of them are Capricorns. No,
and most of them have a thing against other races, which is why they're always leaving.
They are always leaving. Tolkien, they leave.
Yeah.
In Forgotten, remember in early
Realms,
they leave. Yeah, they were all leaving.
I've always said as a DM, it's like they're always leaving. I just go bye. Don't let the door hit you on the way out.
They don't have something against other races. All of them, anyway. They traditionally don't like dwarves, and they're condescending to everyone else.
Right. Like we're the only ones who know how to run the world. That's
why we're leaving.
Yeah. Exactly.
Don't get me started on elves. I especially Tolkien elves. We'll have a whole other podcast on our hands.
Now people may think that I have a thing against elves. Nothing could be further from the truth. Elves in basic D&D I happen to think are somewhat awesome. They combine the best of both a fighter and a magic user. They level. One of the downsides is they level very slow.
But they are so nice. If you can keep them alive, oh my god!
I mean, at low levels, they can kick butt.
All right, so let's talk about some of the basic elf abilities, and I can speak for BX and all that. Basically,
my favorite.
They have all of the weapon and armor options of a fighter.
That's right.
They do not get the fighter D8 hit die, nor are they stuck with the wizard D4 hit die.
Right.
They get a D6, so they're kind of right down the middle.
Mm-hmm.
They have infravision 60 feet, an enhanced ability to detect hit secret doors, both by looking and simply by being near them, for secret and concealed doors. And they are immune to paralysis induced by
That's my favorite ability of theirs.
The ghoul touch thing?
The ghoul touch, the zombie touch. No, it's zombie rod. Ghoul touch. Excuse me.
And
because when I played, the DMs ran a lot of undead.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, yeah.
And they can cast spells as a wizard with the same progression.
That's right.
And unlike a wizard, if you read closely, at least in Labyrinth Lord, it doesn't say that you can't cast spells in armor. It simply says wizards, who are normally the only ones who can cast arcane spells, can't wear armor. So technically, elves can cast spells in full plate mail.
That's right, because they are technically not wizards.
That is correct. Even though they have spell books, they memorize spells the same way as a wizard, they use scrolls the same way as a wizard, and they are, for all mechanical purposes, a wizard. Now, is there any differences in the RC, Glenn?
Looking.
And I know in BX they max out at 10th level.
Yes, they do. That's one of the downsides is you got the demi-human level caps.
But for the power you get, I mean, you're effectively a fighter and a mage at the same time.
Okay. Here's one of the downside. One of the downsides, for instance, a fighter. Let's take a regular old fighter. Fighter experience level. To get to second level, he needs 2,000 experience points. To get to third level, he needs 4,000. Let's go over to the elf here. The elf needs to get to second level 4,000 experience. At the third level, 8,000 experience. Now you're thinking, oh my god, that's terrible. No, not if you're that strong out the gate. No,
it's not. No, it is not.
And you know what? After 10th level, you can still get stuff, but you get attack ranks.
Now, I'm not as familiar with the RC. How does the attack ranks go? Is it like additional attacks per round, or your attack modifier increases, but not as fast as a fighter?
I'm looking here. See, they got C, D, E, F, G, H, which is supposed to mean something, and I can't really find it right now.
All right, and Eric's, go ahead.
Yeah.
Now let's see, 11th, say they're 11th level. They get the fighter combat options, 2 attacks per round, possible at this level. 11th, 12th, 14th level, automatically takes half damage from any breath weapon.
Oh, and that's right. Elves have increased base saves. Their saves start out lower because they're demi-human. That's right. I forgot about
13,
that.
14, 15, 16, 17, 18th level, 3 attacks per round.
What's the XP to reach 18th level?
18th level is 2,600,000 experience points.
I don't think I've earned that much XP in 30 years of gaming.
If you want to go 3 million, you can get to 20th. And this is a game that goes to what, 36th level?
RC goes to 36. Now, Eric, as I recall, in the 3 Little White Books, elves work quite a bit differently.
Yeah, because, and obviously by looking at the White Books compared to the later versions of how they treated it, it's not multi-classing like you might know from AD&D, and it's not dual classing like you might know from AD&D. It's simultaneous.
Isn't that the one where they have to decide every day, okay, I'm going to be a fighter today?
Well, every adventure. Okay, so you start an adventure and you're either a fighter or a magic user. And if you're a fighter, you're earning your experience points as a fighter.
Okay.
So they're limited to 4th level as a fighter, 8th level as a magic user. However, if they have magical armor, they can wear that and still cast spells as a magic user.
Ah.
There you go.
So, like, if I wake up, if I would sit down to a session and I say, this session, I'm an elf and I want to be a fighter, for that session, or for that adventure, I should say, I can't access my spells.
The way I read it, that is correct. But I've seen people read it differently. I've seen people say, well, adventure could be every day. So when I sleep, it's like I learned that now I'm going to be a magic. Now, can you imagine having to track? Well, okay, this day you earned the XP as a fighter. This day you earned it as a magic user.
That sounds like a nightmare.
That drives me crazy. Right there. That'd drive me crazy. So, like in the RC, they only go up to 10th level, which means they're capped at 5th level spells.
Mm-hmm. But still, 5th level spells is still like that's like teleport, and you've got some nasty spells in there.
Which is nice for the DM too, because you can still have a character that taps out at 10 and still have him be a threat as an NPC to the party. Mm-hmm. There could be master mages, elven mages out there that can give them a hard time.
And I know that in the BX rules at 9th or 10th, I cannot recall which because I don't have the book in my head, they can establish kind of a woodland stronghold.
Yeah.
And they befriend all the animals in the air, like within a 1 mile per level radius, and the animals will tell them what's going on.
Right. They're also better at finding secret and hidden doors.
Mm-hmm. So now, let's talk about what it means to you guys to play an elf. I have a deep dark confession to make.
What's that?
I'm going to make it publicly here. Normally, I really dislike elves. That's not the deep dark confession. That's pretty much an open secret. And this is dipping way further into 2nd edition, but I still think they're cool. I love blade singers. I think it's a cool concept.
You mean blade dancers or blade singers?
No, they're called blade singers.
No, blade singers.
Yep, 2nd ed book of elves.
Complete book of elves.
Book of broken.
You are not alone. So
now, that being said, the rules for blade singers are from 2nd ed are pretty broken, but we're not talking about 2nd ed. But you can take that concept of a spell-slinging sword master and make it work perfectly as a concept with a basic elf, because you take your sword, you get yourself a set of elven chain or magic armor, you get a few cool spells, and you're good to go.
Right.
You take an elf, and if you make it to 5th level and you slap haste on him,
whoa,
he's heap nasty. Or you slap haste plus shield plus mage armor, and it's like I am a walking death machine.
Yeah.
So I feel like that there's a lot of interplay there. I know that I have talked with Pete Spawn, who wrote the Amherst setting.
Right.
He says in his home games, elves don't get magic user spells; they get druid spells.
Interesting.
I think that's a really neat way to do things because it reinforces that tie to nature. Yeah. And I think and it's funny because that was a house rule I would allow my players to choose at character creation. Basically, high elves cast magic user spells. Wood elves cast druid spells. That's the only difference.
Speaking of BX, going over to Labyrinth Lord for a minute. When we played Labyrinth Lord, we, like a lot of people, we use the Advanced Edition Companion. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because we had parties with classed elves and racist class elves in the same party.
Now, how did that play out? Because I've heard of that, but I've never done it. I've never had that in the same group.
It pretty much balanced each other out. I mean, I've seen instances where the classed elves, say the elven cleric or something like that, said, "Okay, call the elf. We got some undead here, and I can't turn them." That kind of thing. So it's like, get the elf out here and just kill him.
Mm-hmm. Now, what I always found interesting about elves in the basic incarnations was, when I think elves, I think archers. But yet, at least in Labyrinth Lord, elves, while they are good in combat, as good as any fighter, they're not particularly good with ranged weapons. Not like halflings who get a bonus.
Right.
It's all based on their decks. And I thought that was an interesting, considering the tradition of, the Legolas-ish elven archer.
Right.
You don't really have that with the BX elf. They are, for my wheelhouse, I always go back to Tolkien, they are much more Elrond. They are highly skilled in magic, and they are trained warriors, and they're kind of like a little bit of everything. And that's also why they're probably
which is interesting because in Rulecyclopedia Mentor, they automatically know how to set lance, charge, and all that.
Mm-hmm.
It's very far from being a ranged weapons master.
That almost reminds me of the old AD&D Elven Cavalier.
Yeah.
You know, that's what that reminds me of.
And of course, they can take weapon mastery just like a fighter. You know, if you want to get into that.
Well, that's a whole. The chart there, I don't even want to touch. That makes.
Well, you know what? If I was
look...
running RC anymore, I got a copy of Dark Dungeons, and they break it down a lot easier. It's still the same, thing, but they actually spend the time. They don't give you a little tiny, break your eyes trying to read a chart. They actually the time of each weapon and what it means to master and actually explain it. And I can actually make sense of this.
See, I had a house rule. Go ahead, Eric.
No, I was just going to say that is where the clones exceed upon what they're based upon. It's clarity. You know, I love feeling my little brown books. Look, my little brown book, not with the reprint art either, the real stuff. And I love holding them. And I love to read them. But running a game from them is a real Peter.
Yeah,
it is.
And that's where the clones shine through.
I always house ruled the weapon advancement from RC. My rule was 1 slot for proficiency, 2 slots gives you +1 to hit, +2 to damage, 3 slots gives you +3 to hit and damage, 4 slots gives you an extra attack. That's it.
When I joined my group, they had just finished getting TPK'd in a 2nd edition game. And said, okay, we're going to try RC. And then we played for a while and it's like, okay, Matt stands up going, I want to try weapons mastery. So next issue, we'll figure it out. It lasted about maybe 2 sessions. When everybody's going, this is too much. It's nice to have the extra damage and these other maneuvers and stuff, but
it's too much. Yeah, I agree.
On the flip side, I like the skill system.
It felt like it was just taken, and I read the RC having never read Beyond the Red Box.
Right.
I went straight from Red Box to RC to AD&D 2nd Edition. And to me, it felt a lot like the skill system from AD&D 2nd Edition, just bolted retroactively, where that wasn't the case, but that's how it came off to me.
I felt like it was a lot more simplified.
Well, yeah, it was ability checks. Yeah, it was just ability checks.
You know, I'm kind of I have a love-hate relationship with skill systems because I want my games to be, a little chrome as possible. But at the same time, I can understand the need for something of a little tiny skill system. Because it always goes back to 1st edition AD&D where I saw that secondary occupation chart and, okay, I rolled on it. I'm a woodsman. What does that mean in the game? Nothing.
Right. See, and I love the secondary system because if somebody says, well, I'm a woodsman, I would know this, that, or the other.
Okay,
I, as a DM, can say, I can say, okay, yay or nay. I can veto it or accept it. And then I can say, all right, well, then give me a wisdom check to see if you can find any tracks.
Right.
I'm sorry, no, you're a fisherman. You wouldn't know how to track people in the woods.
Okay, well, I buy that, but I just saw it in there and I'm going, this leads nowhere. And I come to find out later, I've read some stuff that when they talked to Gygax saying they were supposed to have like some kind of system for that, but it got cut from the book or something, or it never made it to the book or something like, because it looked like something that was supposed to lead somewhere, but it didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And it always, and I was glad it was there, but it always bugged me, as far as like, this is why I like skill systems, is the fact that what did your character do before he was an adventurer?
Right.
And that has to have some kind of bearing over what you're doing now.
Yep, that's
it doesn't have to be much. That's why I like Tunnels and Trolls' talent system, because it isn't very much.
That's right. when I was doing secondary skills for Hero's Journey. It was very much that this is what you did before you were an adventurer, to the point where it impacts your starting gear and your starting money. But anyway, elves. Let's go back to
elves.
We've gone on a three old man tangent.
Yes. Look, with me, it's an occupational hazard.
Yeah. You're not the only one, my friend.
Oh, yeah.
So how do you take elves and spice them up a little bit? Maybe play with them a little bit. And we're not talking about putting them in chainmail bikinis. I already mentioned, Eric, you and chainmail bikinis need to stay as far away from each other as possible. End of story.
Well, you never know, man. I might cosplay at North Texas this year.
I will turn. Well, you guys heard it here. You guys heard it here.
His wife might have something to say about that.
Yeah, she probably would.
You heard him say it here. He's going to cosplay in a chainmail bikini at North Texas.
He said cosplay. He didn't say as what.
Which means I won't be there. At least not in the same room.
The photos will tell all.
Well, I keep
trying to get. You leave the photos. You leave your photographic evidence.
I keep trying to get Bad Mike to do Satan with the thongs. So,
dude,
people
just a mental image in my head. That which I'm seeing right now can't be unseen. Oh my God!
Be glad we're recording.
So that's not what the listeners are saying.
Oh yeah, I know. So let's talk about kind of like changes or how you play elves or what you do them at their table, so they're not just fighter magic users.
Well, are we talking like stat-wise or chrome-wise, or just like the way the world's set up to deal with elves?
Chrome-wise, what you do in your settings, how you play them at your table, whether as PCs, NPCs, whatever. What do you do? What do you do if they're God forbid drow?
Oh.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you go to the Gazetteers, you have the dark elves.
You do have shadow elves.
Elves, that's it. Yeah.
Which are a whole different. They're not even drow. They're just something completely different.
Yeah.
That gets overlooked a lot. They're
unless you play the old Capcom D&D video games.
Yes. I mean, they even gave shadow elves their own gas.
They did. A very good one too. But how do you change it? I talked to my friend Corey on Thaco's Hammer, and he has a really unique take on elves in his world. His elves got into a lot of trouble with everybody way back millennia, and people don't like elves because remember in The Hobbit, where the elves wouldn't help out the dwarves with smog, and they got that's how the animosity started. Well, they kind of did something like that to the rest of the world. They sort of hung them out to dry when, some cataclysmic thing, they fought them back. But it's like, elves are not very well liked, and they keep a low profile, and every time they show up, it's like they're very apologetic. And they're not haughty at all.
That's one thing you people think of as elves being good, in the general good evil sense. But if you look in the basic rules, it never says anything about them being particularly good or particularly evil.
Well, you got the three alignment access system. There's a lot of play in there, a lot of play, which is why I like the three alignment system.
I tend to prefer the 3-point system as well, if any alignment is used at all. But I'm also a firm believer that using 3-point, 95 to 99% of people in the world are going to be neutral.
Yeah.
But actually, looking in the OD&D with the 3-point alignment, elves are under law and neutrality.
Really? They're under law? Because
law is good. Have to remember law and chaos, which was, I'm assuming, based upon the old Elric, Morcock and the Elric stuff. But they really treat law as good and chaos as evil. It's not when you get the non-alignment system where law and chaos got broken away from that assumed.
And what, Swords and Wizardry is like the 5-point?
Swords and Wizardry uses 3-point.
Oh, they use 3-point too, that's right.
I know BX uses 3-point, RC uses 3-point, Holmes uses 5-point, I believe.
Yeah. You're right. There was a recent one I just reviewed that used the 5-point also. I think it was Black Hack or something.
Black Hack uses 5-point?
Or Black Hack or White Hack. I can't remember which one. But
I tend to. I
know what it was, and I'm running it right now. Astonishing Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea.
Okay, which doesn't have elves. Which
interesting because that's based on 1E. Yet they're doing the 5-point alignment system.
I tend to make elves in my campaigns pretty neutral, because I always see them as believing themselves above the concerns of the world and therefore pretty apathetic.
Right.
We don't get involved. Elves who go out and adventure, particularly with non-elves,
Right.
are, in my mind, the exception.
Mm-hmm. That's the way it's supposed to be. Same with dwarves,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, demi-humans are supposed to be rare. That's why they're their own class, and I believe, at least in Labyrinth Lord, they're the only classes, the demi-human classes, are the ones with an attribute requirement. You have to have, I think it's a strength or intelligence or both of 9 to be an elf.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Oh, here's a funny story. When we first played RC, no, it was Labyrinth Lord? Yeah, Labyrinth Lord. I rolled an 18 strength. When I was making a character, I rolled 18 strength and something like 9 intelligence. Not a real bright guy.
Mm-hmm.
And the DM says, well, what do you want to play? He says, I want to play an elf.
So you were Conan the elf?
I wanted to play. No, he was. I says, well, what's his backstory? He says, well, he's in this town. He was the blacksmith that decided he wanted to go adventuring, and he was kind of like this Gomer Pyle elf. And I says, well, why are you doing this? Is because I'm going to prove that elves, he throws magic and stuff, but he's strong too. He could really wade in and stuff. I says, I want to go against the type. I also wanted to do a mage with 18 strength, just because, and that's as close as I could get.
I've seen it. I've seen it done before, and in the end, a mage with an 8, or at least a mage with an 18 to strength, isn't that great, because if you're in melee and you're a wizard, something went wrong. But I also like the idea of, at least elves, to me, more than the other demi-human races, lend themselves to going past the stereotype because they're so old.
Yes.
They are, to me, more likely to have a more diversity within their culture. Okay, I studied swordsmanship for 100 years. I know everything I know about that. I want to study pottery or fishing or, dwarvish poetry or whatever.
Right.
So there's a lot more room for role play beyond the I'm going to go frolic in the woods and dance with the squirrels.
Yeah, but that really appeals to the tree hugger gamers. It's a very new age Renaissance thing, because I always run into these people who are like, new age Renaissance people. It says, what do you play? Oh, my elf Shadow Weave over here. He goes, he has a pet tiny dragon, and it's like, yeah, okay. I'll just call him Mary Sue, okay? Fine.
Now, and consider that elves have a long life. I mean, they typically start play, you're already 100 years old at first level. What have you been doing for a century?
Yep.
Yep. That you're only first level.
Meditation. Come on.
That's a lot of, Yoda didn't meditate that much.
No, I know. And that was weird when I was first gaming with AD&D and trying to comprehend how elves were compared to the other races. And in D&D, elves can die of old age, which, if you were basing upon the Tolkien,
doesn't happen.
Doesn't happen. Maybe they go away and fade. Mm-hmm. But the other thing with the long life of the elves, that in my mind, you're more apt to find elven hermits, the people that.
That's interesting.
And it's going to be the hermits like, well, my granddaddy visited old man Fitzabomb, whatever the guy's name is. And it's like, they might even not know. Is he an elf? Who knows? He's been alive for the last 300 years, sitting in this little hermit place, surrounded by animals,
Just like you're doing now, surrounded by animals.
Oh, yeah, like the cat saying hello.
Hello,
and that lends itself to another interesting point with elves, is age gives you tends to make you a very wise person.
It
but
does.
if elves are go ahead.
No, I've seen them played like that, yeah.
But if they're sequestered in that, if they're off in the woods meditating for 100 years, they're not going to have a clue what's going on in the world. Because that's 3 generations of humans who have grown up, had children,
That's
and
right.
are 2 of which are at least dead, if not 3 or 4 generations dead. So it's going to be a completely different world. When I was young and I first set this up, Glen Stan the Wise was ruling this kingdom. He's been dead for 70 years. What? And so there's that out of touch element.
Well, there's also, on the plus side, elves probably have an insane amount of connections. And
Do they,
people,
though?
And people.
Do they, though?
I mean, yeah, people die off and stuff, but I mean, you know, there's we got to go talk, or we got to go deal with this ancient dragon Smoke in the cage, and the elves like, oh, Smoke, yeah, we go back. I'll just talk to him. You know,
I could see that. Another interesting idea, I think, for an elf NPC or even a PC who's first level. What if you're the creepy old woodland witch or woodland wise man? You might only know first level spells, but people go out in the woods to get you to make sure they can go to sleep at night or make a balm so they, that rash goes away.
Right.
And it's a strange fey creature who lives out in the woods, and and with elves, I think there's an element there where you can play up that strangeness.
Yeah.
Some of the most effective spellcasters I've ever seen have only been able to cast first and second level spells at most, but when they do it effectively, it makes them seem far more powerful. Right. And I think elves, if I were an elf, and I would assume that most non-humans, dwarves and halflings as well, don't know the level of abilities and the powers of an elf. So if you're an elf, you can walk up. There's this undead thing going on. We talked about their ghoul paralysis.
Right.
What if you're an elf and before you see a bunch of ghouls, you're immune to their touch. The other people might not necessarily know that in character, and you act like you're casting some big powerful spell, and then you walk up and the ghouls touch you, and you're just like whack with a sword.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, "Oh, that's a powerful magic you have." Like, yes, of course it is.
Oh yeah.
There's nothing wrong with doing that. Or I played an elf once who we went into combat and I cast light on my sword. And they're like, what are you doing? And in character said, I am enchanting this with an evil's bane so these creatures may die. And I went into combat, and on the third round I rolled a critical hit and then played it off like it was the magic.
Wow.
So nice. he was never really as powerful as he came off as, but I'm an elf, and damn it, you're going to know that I am one of the Eldar races of the world. My people were around when you were still banging your heads on rocks. We were living in the high life. Oh, yeah. And I think that leads you to get away from it's just an elf.
Right. Here's something interesting. Way back when in my prehistory gaming days played Champions, I wrote up a superhero character who was immortal.
Okay.
And the DM, or the GM, I should say, came up with he put the idea in my head is, he's been around, I'm saying he's been around for like at least 800 years. Mm-hmm. And it's like, he probably has a hell of a lot of skills, more than what's on his character sheet. How many of them has he forgotten?
That's
or rusty at? Mm-hmm. Which is kind of, then you fall into the old Martian Manhunter thing. Oh, I didn't know I could do that.
Which is a great way to explain how you pick up a new spell when you gain a level. I always had it. I just forgot I could do it. Or you pick up a new proficiency.
Yeah.
I
must have learned to play the piano somewhere.
I took fencing classes 4 years ago, and if you handed me a sword right now, I'd probably know some of the basics, but most of the stuff I've forgotten.
Right.
Because I just haven't done it, and that's 4 years. Imagine if it's been 50 or 100 or 150 or 1,000.
I'm sure it would come back with practice. It's always like, well, I'm rusty at it.
Which leads us back to, why are you a first level elf? Well, I didn't used to be a first level elf. I used to be a 7th level elf, and I just haven't done it in a while.
Yeah. Here's one. An elf with a vow of silence.
That would be interesting.
How long you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody here's Glen.
Yeah, I don't blame him. I saw a guy who played an elf in a game where, second session, he got captured, and to prevent him from casting spells, they cut his tongue out.
Wow.
So he could cast spells, but he couldn't anymore because he couldn't talk. So he had this spell book full of spells that he couldn't use until 4 levels later we got him regenerated.
Oh, but he regenerated his tongue? Cool.
Yeah, we had a regeneration spell finally cast on. It was like a druid spell thing, and that guy was so happy. And then the cool thing was the player spent the next 2 sessions role-playing his character, learning how to talk again. Because he hadn't talked for a year in-game.
Right.
And I was like, that's cool. So imagine an elf who's by themselves, therefore doesn't need to talk to people. The only things he might know how to say are the magic spells he knows.
Right.
Elves, to me, more than dwarves, especially more than halflings, are alien. To humans, a couple of weeks or a year isn't that long. And we live 75 years.
Well, there's also... Go ahead.
So to an elf, 30 years is nothing.
Mm-hmm.
It's the blink of an eye. Oh, there's this warlord has taken over this kingdom. We have to stop him. The elf might just say, we'll just let him die. He'll age out.
Yeah.
That's a perfectly valid response from their perspective.
Right. And, elves are so long-lived. If they do eventually die, and elves die. You can, take a sword, chop them up. Yep. But I've seen, is it in Tolkien or somewhere else where they've said that elves don't have souls; they have spirits like animals.
In Tolkien,
and so they basically reincarnate into another baby elf.
In Tolkien, the way it works, it's a little, and I know Tolkien fairly well. The way it works is elves can't age and die. They don't die from old age.
Right.
A good example is in Lord of the Rings and the Tolkien setting. Galadriel is older than the sun.
Wow.
Literally. She's older than the sun. She's like 35,000 years old. And when elves die, their soul or their spirit goes to basically this hall where it waits and just hangs out. And in a very, very few rare cases, the soul has come back. And I think that is why in D&D...
So it's like an elf Valhalla type thing.
It's more like an elf doctor's waiting room.
Oh, okay.
You're just waiting for the creator of the universe to tell you what happened. And that's Tolkien. But I think it ties to D&D because in most versions of D&D, elves can't be resurrected. They can only be reincarnated.
That's right.
And that is a huge deal, which means if you play an elf, most of the time you only got one shot at it. If you die, you are SOL.
Well, if you take...
Or SOL.
Sure. But if you take the conceit that elves, when they get killed or whatever, reincarnate as another elf, baby elf, whatever, it makes it interesting for the players who lose their elf character. Where,
I think so.
Like, they can come up with another character, maybe two characters, maybe they lose a couple more characters, and all of a sudden they come up with this elf who seems mighty familiar to the party. Mm-hmm. He may not remember, or maybe he does remember, Well,
and here's a question. What if he got reincarnated as something other than an elf?
Well, that's always the problem with those kind of spells.
What if he comes back as a human or a goblin or, something?
Or a gelatinous cube, I don't know.
Well, that's another problem entirely. You just put him on a sandwich and, take some Tom to be right.
Ooh. Yeah.
But you guys don't do that?
It's not kosher.
But that's a New York joke.
Right, you don't like that stuff. Anyway, if he came back as, say, like you said, a goblin, there'd be a problem.
Now, how do you use elves as antagonists? Because they're typically portrayed as neutral at worst or good. And I'm not talking about drow. Drow are easy to make antagonists. They're evil because they're drow.
And you can, it's very, very easy to make a high elven priest or something like that over some kind of fanatical cult or something. Because, maybe he's the cult of this one god who grants immortality. Should be funny.
Well,
look at me!
If you're an elf and you've been meditating for 200 years and you come and walk out of the forest and there's all these humans on this land, that land was yours. When you started meditating, that was yours. And you come out.
The old Native American thing.
Mm-hmm. So is the elf right? These humans have been here for 5 generations, but he's been here the whole time and it was his land. True. There's to me, the thing about playing elves and portraying elves properly is they are so not just humans with pointy ears and magic spells. They have such a different perspective and a different mentality. And I feel like that is easily forgotten when players sit down to play them.
I think people should observe, go back to read Tolkien, of course, but observe the movies the way they show the elves in the Lord of the Rings films. Because not only is Legolas, I mean, when Gandalf was lost and they were all crying and stuff, he's just standing around trying to figure it out.
Well, and
and during Helm's Deep, that one guy who died, the look on his face like, I'm dying.
Right, he has no idea what he's experiencing. Well, and there's little things you can do as a DM to show off elves not being human, and to being truly magical. One of the little things in the Lord of the Rings films, and this is shown in the books as well, when they're crossing the mountains and they're climbing through the snow, they're all trudging through it neck deep,
except for Legolas.
He's running on it, not even leaving footprints.
Yeah, he's right on top of it.
And while a jerk player will be like, "What does that mean? I don't have to worry about difficult terrain." No, jerk. You don't get to take advantage of it. This is a story element to show that
you just don't leave a trace. That's all.
Right. It's meant to push forward that image that there is something different about you.
Right.
And I think that is I could harp on this forever. It's a huge thing about elves. Elves, I like the idea of using their magic spells not as just I cast the spell, as again in Tolkien, there's a conversation between Frodo and Galadriel right before they look in the mirror.
Right. And
Frodo says, "Is it magic, the mirror?" And she looks and says, "I don't understand what you mean by that word. You use it to describe what Gandalf does, and that is good, and you use it to describe what Sauron does, and that is evil. To us, it just is the way things are. Magic isn't this strange alien thing. It's much a part of nature for elves as breathing is for humans. It is inherent to their existence, which is why, in my mind at least, why all elves in the various incarnations of Basic can cast spells. Because to not be able to cast spells would be like chopping their hands off. Something is wrong. I am incomplete."
I'm going to bring up a dirty phrase right now. The D&D movie, the first one, the fun one, the cheesy one. Tom Baker as that elf saying, "We don't use magic. We are magic."
Yes.
And it's like for a bad movie, you really hit the nail on the head right there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and I think that's very, very, very accurate. It's part of who they are, and that's in a way that human mages in D&D. One of the interesting things I think that gets forgotten about when you make a character is a lot of times you roll to see how old your starting character is. Optionally, and thieves can be as young as like 14 or 15. If you look, almost always human magic users are in their late 20s or early 30s.
Right.
That means they've just started. So humans spend 30 years learning to manipulate the most basic magic spells, detect magic, crap like that. Elves do that naturally, which means, in my mind, when an elf casts detect magic, it's less him casting the spell than him concentrating for a second. And mechanically, he still needs to have his hands free and all that crap. But in my mind, it's more he picks up a sword or touches a magic statue and is like, there is some strange energy in this, that he can feel. Mm-hmm. Whereas the human has to basically do a formula.
Right.
And that is something that I think is important to portray in elves. Like, they're not humans.
Science versus craft.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Well done.
Yeah, that's
yes, it's very much so.
Saying that, then there's the adventurer elves who cut away from the norm, which is the player characters. They've got to have a slightly different viewpoint. I mean, yeah, they have the elven viewpoint of being alien and stuff like that, but there's got to be something else there to make them pick up a sword and go off and quest.
To risk what amounts to other species as immortality.
Right.
You could hang out in the woods and spend 700 years studying, frolicking with the squirrels, and mastering your craft. Or you could pick up a sword, go hang out with the savages, and probably get stabbed in the process. Why are you putting a 700-year future on the risk or a certain your future at risk to go out and swing a sword with a bunch of what two elves are morons, short-sighted morons.
Right.
You know, and in Legolas's case, it is because it's important.
Well,
you know,
it was also Elrond. Well, Elrond also thought it was important too. That's why kind of.
I didn't see Elrond going.
That's true, but
I didn't see Elrond going.
He did reforge the sword.
No, but he didn't go himself.
Okay, I know he was part of the party who were on the way out.
Well, here's it again. My Tolkien craziness. Elrond to me is a great example of a name level elf. I've built my stronghold. I have this great magic power. I'm retired. I'm going to hang out here. Here's a cool magic item. Here's a sword that's +1/+3 versus evil. Here you go, human fighter. Go take over the kingdom. I'm going to hang out here, and when you succeed, actually, really, whether you succeed or not, in 5 years, I'm bouncing. And Legolas goes off because Legolas is young.
He is. For
an elf. In Lord of the Rings, I believe he's only and he's a young elf. He's only 2,000 or 3,000 years old, which to Tolkien is young.
Right.
Whereas, and if you are an old elf, you remember Elrond has seen what the human world is like. He fought Sauron. He fought in the last alliance of men and elves. He was on the slopes of Mount Doom. He watched Isildur fall to evil, basically.
That's a whole bunch of evil, a whole bunch of elves putting their immortality on the line because of it had to be done.
Right. And one of the things in Tolkien and I think D&D is that elves who do that and demi-humans in general who do that are rare, are very rare. The exception, not the rule. And I have always taken it, and I could be wrong here, excuse me if I'm pontificating or making an assumption, that the idea is that at least in the older basic edition of D&D, once you hit name level, the idea was that you would build a stronghold and retire.
Yeah.
That was pretty much it. You know, if you busted your tail for a couple of years and you made it to 9th level and you built your stronghold, you took on apprentices, you retired the character, and the apprentices probably became your new character.
Yep.
So, and to me, that's what Elrond does. You know, Rivendell is his stronghold. That's what Galadriel did. Lorien is her stronghold.
Yeah.
You know, in D&D terms.
Right.
If you were going to put it in D&D context.
It just happens to be the capital of the Elven, you know. Yeah, but it's still a stronghold.
And my brain always goes to Tolkien. It's just it's the way I'm wired.
Well, that's okay. You know, it's a good thing.
You know, and I think it shows up in other races too. Dwarves are expected to build a stronghold, and it says at least in Labrador, and establish a clan. You are perpetuating your people. You know, halflings only go to 8th level because halflings go out usually to do one or two things. I don't know, save a dwarf kingdom, throw a ring in a volcano, I don't know, whatever they do, and then go home. You go there and back again. You don't go out and adventure indefinitely for no reason. There's not this human concept. There's
got to be something else in here that makes them do it too. So they're wired in a little different way than the normal halfling, elf, dwarf, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, look at again. By talking Legolas, what does he do? He goes out with these humans and this dwarf and these little midgets that he's probably never seen before. And by the end of it, Legolas is so changed, he calls a member of a race he hates his best friend. That to me is a strange person who is clearly outside their cultural norm.
Oh yeah.
And it happens so quickly. The events of the Lord of the Rings, from the time they leave Rivendell to the time they destroy the ring, is from December 25th to, I believe it's the last week of March. So you're talking 3 months.
That's it.
From the time, that's it. And in 3 months to an elf is like dinner.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So over the course of what to us would be a couple hours.
Well, still with the human life, even with the human life, that's pretty quick, 3 months.
Mm-hmm. So think about it. He went from in 3 months, which to them is probably a couple days.
We're not talking about the 100 Years' War here. So
Right. So imagine, you sit down to dinner with somebody you hate, and by the time you get up for dessert, they're your best friend, and you would lay down your life for them. That's a strange person. That's a reckless person. And that's what makes Legolas an adventuring elf. He doesn't take that long perspective. If he if he sat down and considered it, maybe he would. But he doesn't. He jumps, and in the movies, I believe he's the first one to say, like, after Aragorn says, "You have my sword," he's the next one up to say, "You have my bow." He's right there.
And no matter what you think of the Hobbit movies, I like them, and it gave me some back on Legolas dealing with his father and how him and his father got along. That may have been another thing that kind of pushed him into the adventuring thing, because he was pretty disgusted with him for quite a while.
I will say this, as a Tolkien fan, as a Tolkien purist, I love Tolkien. I hate those movies as a purist. They're a great example of a D&D movie.
True.
There's a lot of fun D&D stuff in there.
I don't care how you take it.
And Legolas is... Oh, yeah. And I'm not to tell anybody what they like and what they shouldn't like.
I know.
But Legolas's father, to me, is more an example of how most elves act.
Right.
We are interested in ourselves, and the preservation of our kingdom.
Right. But that also shows how Legolas is wired slightly different from his dad. It says, Come on, Dad, wake up, look around, look what's happening. You want to stay here and just brood, fine. They're just going to be tearing this down around your ears.
Right.
Yeah.
And the elf attitude is, well, they might do that for 10, 20, 100 years, but eventually they'll all die and we'll be fine. Whereas Legolas is like, that doesn't make it okay.
Until like an orc or a goblin comes over and sticks a sword in your back.
Right.
That's basically what his thing is. It's like, look, if you want to wait that long, that's fine, but we got to keep them off the doorstep.
Yeah. Not to sound political or historical, but to me a good example of elvish philosophy is actually America in World War II. We're neutral. We're not getting involved. We're staying over here. We're not getting involved. It's not our fight. It's not our thing. Until Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
And then it was, wait a minute. And like elves, once they were awakened, it changed the course of the world. It changed the course of the world. And I know that's my own Amerocentric attitudes coming through, I'm sure.
The old Toho, quote,
We've awakened the sleeping dragon.
Woke up a sleeping giant and filled him with resolve, which is our biggest mistake.
Yep. And to me, that is how elves should be portrayed. If you're playing a traditional elf, something awoke your resolve. If you're not playing a traditional elf, then you're a little bit cracked and something's wrong.
Right.
And maybe your buddies were glad to see, we sent Bill off because, he wanted to go talk to humans, and why would he do that? That's weird.
That's what makes good stories, is the one that, the one person or whatever that goes against the norm.
So... And that leads me to another point I want to talk about, and that's Elvish. And I say Elvish because it's Tolkien. It's D&D most of the time they say Elven, and the two are interchangeable. Elven magic items. Now you think about boots of Elvenkind, cloaks of Elvenkind, Elvish chainmail, all that kind of stuff.
None of which are given lightly.
And they are not the limit to the extent of elf magic items. And they shouldn't be, at least in my mind, too, in elf, it's not thought of as a magic item.
Culture item.
Yeah, it's a culture item. The cloaks they give, again, we're going back to Tolkien, the cloaks they give the Fellowship, they never call them magical. They say they will shield you from unfriendly eyes. There's never a word magic said. And I always imagine if the magic of elves is a natural thing to them, if it is something that they do inherently as a craft, you're going to see more things like cloaks and boots than you are swords and arrows, because if they're isolationist, they're not going to be at war a lot. And one of my favorite magic items in all of Tolkien is the Elvish rope. It's a rope that doesn't come untied until its wielder commands it. And to me, that is one of the singular most useful magic items ever.
And if you go by the Lord of the Rings movie, it looks like a piece of twine.
It does. Well, in the books, do you know what it's made of?
What?
Hair.
Okay.
It's elvish hair.
Wow.
Yeah. And
that's interesting.
Yeah. And there are things like, you can take that and make any magic item and give it that elvish flair. Like, you have, the elvish way bread from Lord of the Rings. What if that's just rations that don't go bad? Sure, that doesn't sound like much, but that's really useful. Uh-huh. I have a little 1 pound square of food here that can last a month. It doesn't have to be stored. It can get wet. It's not going to get damaged by the environment.
Hardtack. No.
Yeah, it's elvish hardtack. It's exactly what it is. The magic. There's a scene in again. Yeah, lembas bread. There's a scene in when they're crossing the snow mountain we were talking about earlier. They get worn out a lot. They get tired, and Gandalf keeps giving this thing that is referred to as the elvish cordial, which makes you think it's a wine. And every time he gives it to them, they become refreshed and reinvigorated. When the last time I read Lord of the Rings, I immediately thought that's a potion of cure light wounds. Oh. They're taking damage from the environment. Gandalf is giving them a potion of cure light wounds that the elves made.
Okay.
And I was just like it's that kind of magic is all around you and already in the D&D books. It's a matter of how you describe it, what you call it, and you add a little bit of culture into it. And that can work for any kind of magic item. What if it's a dwarvish brew known to reinvigorate and hearten the soul? Here, have this awesome dwarvish ale that happened. Okay, you drink it and you heal. The DM rolls die by screen. It's 3 points of damage. Wow, really? That's so cool. Player doesn't need to know it's just a potion of cure light wounds.
Yeah, it's just exactly.
Very nice.
Very nice. Anyway, that just shows you people that elves in basic D&D, which are racist class, are not just elves. And there's nothing wrong with giving them professions like an elf and cleric. They just would. Well, that's a whole other thing about breaking out the racist class. That's a whole other episode. So, any final words on this, James?
Let's see. Any final words on elves? Let's see. I had something I wanted to say. Oh, yeah. Megavanen, which is an elvish greeting in Tolkien. I believe it or not, I loathe Tolkien elves. I think they're horrible, vile, selfish people. But I understand the mentality.
Interesting. How about you, Eric? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Eric, you got any final words on elves?
Yeah, I'm actually biased toward dwarves, but nobody would have guessed that.
No. Next thing you're going to say is that I prefer halflings.
No. Zach is a gnome. But, no, I always found... I came in to play with first edition, and I always found that elves were overpowered compared to others at low levels, and underpowered when they lost their curve due to XP, especially if you triple classed, because you could do everything. Fight a magic user thief. There, you were great for those first handful of sessions before you fell behind and everything. If you're gonna play an elf, I really do think you have to go in with a vision of what you want it to be, because that is going to define not only how you're going to play it, but especially if you have a choice of class, what class is going to fit best. Elves have options. They're the only class the only race besides humans that can actually cast spells. In original D&D, basic D&D, actually I think even AD&D. Elves and half-elves.
Gnomes could be illusionists, but that's it.
That's right. But gnomes are like elf halfling hybrid anyway.
Don't you dare compare my beautiful, wonderful, shoeless people with those little bastards.
With their little bells in their toes and their little pointed hats.
That's not okay. It's not okay.
No. But no, it's a fun class to play. I still prefer dwarves, man. I can't wait till we do a dwarf episode. I'm all in. Okay.
And my final word is, I really think before you play an elf, elves are awesome in basic. I think they're fantastic. That's the other fantastic race after if they ever add gnomes.
Blasphemer.
I like gnomes. Deal with it. Anyway, I really think you should talk to the DM and find out, like any demi-human in a fantasy world, how the fantasy world treats a demi-human like an elf. What's the prevailing attitude from the common person for an elf? Because there are some worlds where you don't want to play an elf at all, because they, it's almost like playing a half-orc. You're gonna get shunned. See, I would talk to the DM and ask him first, what's the deal with the demi-humans in this world? Then if he's, if it's halfway reasonable, go ahead and play an elf. I mean, they are kick butt. They really are. And that's my final word on it.
And they're an investment. When you were playing an elf, you were in for
yes.
the long haul.
Oh, yes. Yes, if you could avoid that sword in the back, you're good. You're good for the long haul, man.
Mm-hmm.
Even my blacksmith dwarf, he got up to like 7th level. His name was Smitty, by the way.
Your blacksmith elf, you mean?
Yeah, elf, yeah. His name was Smitty.
Of course.
You know how he retired? My DM was using Thunder Rift.
Oh, good setting.
At first. Then he sent us all the way over to Karamikos and back to follow this bad guy. By the time we got there, Thunder Rift went over. Basically, it was the scouring of Thunder Rift.
Oh, that's awesome.
And Smitty and this druid character, when they retired at the entrance to Thunder Rift because it was known now. And basically, they were trying to get people to come back. The druid was trying to restore the forest and stuff, and Smitty was trying to get people he became like the mayor of this town, trying to get people to come back into Thunder Rift and repopulate it. Come on, great place to live. The druid's making trees, all this other stuff, and he's trying to help fix it up. And that's how he retired.
Nice.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
All right. Speaking of retirement, I think that'll close us out for the episode.
Never. Okay,
No,
yeah.
definitely.
Oh, not that retirement. Well, I'm already retired, but anyway. Okay, well, I guess we say goodbye, huh?
Yep. All right, folks, this is DM James signing off of episode 134 of Save or Die Expert Edition. Say goodnight, Eric.
Good night, Eric.
Say goodnight, Glenn.
And I have nothing cheesy to say, so I'll just say goodnight.